And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Laura Whitt-Winyard. Thanks very much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
So, I love having security professionals on the show, specifically ones that have a poster child like career path.
Thank you for that.
So, as we start, I would love to maybe if you can drive me through memory lane and how you got started, what were some milestones in your career path, and just what you can remember and allow the kind of the viewers to take part in that journey.
Oh, gosh, sure. So I started in cybersecurity I bought my first computer in 1999, and I just loved it and ate it up, and I still do today.
Laura, just in time for Y2K.
Yeah, just after, but it was just after Y2K and just after 9/11. So I started in cybersecurity in October of 2001. Oh, no, I'm sorry, October of 2000, so just in time for 9/11, which was an interesting time to be in technology. But I just loved it so much. I figured I can learn anything, so I constantly strived for bigger roles that myself and probably those around me weren't sure I could do, but I did them. I loved it. I learned a lot. I started at Allstate Insurance Company, moved on to CNA Insurance Company, both of which were in Chicago. I was in Chicago at the time. Moved to New York, actually lived in New Jersey, but moved to New Jersey to work for Bloomberg in Manhattan. I was there for 7 years, doing my 2.5 hour each way by train commute, which was a lot, but I loved what I did. I was in leadership at Bloomberg, and then that commute really just got to me after 7 years. 5 hours a day commuting is a lot. And I took a step down from leadership, went to Comcast as a principal engineer, loved it at Comcast, learned so much, got to be involved in several patents, which was amazing. Moved back into leadership at Comcast, and then that's where the trajectory started. I went on to build trust to head up their cybersecurity program. They, at the time, didn't have one, so I created everything net new for them. And then went to DLL. DLL, it's De Lage Landen. It's a subsidiary of Rabobank out of the Netherlands. So I was like the global CISO there, responsible for cybersecurity in 37 countries. Then I thought, how cool would it be to work for a cybersecurity vendor? So I became the CISO for Labyrinth. And then layoffs happened in the tech industry, especially post-COVID. There's been quite a few. So I was impacted by a layoff at Malwarebytes, and then went to work for Hummingbird, which is a company who makes anti-money laundering software, basically filing SARS. It's a compliance tool, financial compliance, not cybersecurity compliance like we think. And then impacted by layoffs. Again, I was recently laid off actually last week.
And talk to me about the things you really like about this particular discipline, because back in the early 2000s, it wasn't as common as it is today to have women in cyber, specifically just in general. It wasn't even called cyber, it was IT security.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the things that you liked about it, and then what attracted you to the particular profession. And it seems like you made an investment both on a personal level and professional level to pursue this.
Yeah. For me, the most interesting thing about it is it's always changing. I don't want a life or a job where I'm just maintaining the status quo. I always want to be learning and innovating and trying to find new ways to do things. With regards to women in cybersecurity, I don't think I ever noticed until it became something that you read in the media or people are talking about. But I've never really noticed that I was like the only female, or I used to race cars, and I have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. What gender I was, or the lack of gender equality as far as just physically being in the room, I never really noticed until it became something in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't about to dwell on that point. I was just was saying how it's interesting that you just fell into it, and it's great. You just pursued something that you wanted to pursue, and regardless, at a time where there were less women, and there's more women now than there used to be. But
Sure.
the fact of the matter is, we would love to get to a point where it's a non-issue at all, that we don't even have to talk about it.
Right.
And I think we're moving in the right direction as well. And specifically in these roles, do you remember any pivotal moments that you could say that really propelled your career? You mentioned that specifically that you took an executive role. In even that, you glance over it like it was nothing, but there's a lot of nuances there, from moving to a team member, maybe a individual contributor in the space, to have an executive leadership role. So talk to me about that transition and what propelled you to take on that role specifically.
I think first of all, what prepared me was my time at Bloomberg. At Bloomberg, I was the global head of security oversight, the number of direct reports that I had were minimal. I wasn't running the entire cybersecurity program, but I had a lot of engagement with varying departments, varying stakeholders, different cultures around the globe. And I think that helped lay the foundation for my career as an executive. And when I went to build trust, as an example, this was my first time setting up my own cybersecurity program. And there was no program at the time, so I could, in essence, do it the way I thought it should always have been done. And I learned a lot from some great people. Myrna Soto from Comcast was my CISO when I was at Comcast, and she's an excellent mentor and coach. I have a really good network of cybersecurity professionals that are great friends that offer advice. And so I think that set me up. I like to lead in the fact that I like to cultivate this mindset and it's almost like being the head cheerleader. Once you get everyone on board and everyone's well, maybe not as excited about it as you are, but very close to getting excited about cybersecurity, that's such an amazing feeling that we're like almost not hive mind, but we're all very in lockstep, and we know what we're doing, and we're all like marching toward the same goal, and that's an amazing feeling.
And Laura, that's an art form, what you just described, because that's soft skills are very hard skills.
Yeah.
And they don't teach you that if you go to school, to be able to, as you mentioned, propel everybody forward in the same direction, and have almost like a hive mindset. And people come from, as you mentioned, different backgrounds, different needs and wants, different aspirations, career goals, and so on. But in order for you to create an effective and efficient and secure program, cybersecurity program, you have to have everybody on board and believe that what you are providing them is the right thing. And then, even though you're leading them, there's still a lot to be said about people being resistant to change and so on. So if they don't believe in what you're doing, they may not contribute as effectively, and then potentially they can fail the program. So there's a long preempt to the next question. So this is on the job training, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, maybe you have the natural skill set because you were, as you mentioned, you grew up with a large family. and you were experiencing so many things growing up. But talk to me about that process of knowing how to deliver something like that, because again, this is soft skills are very hard.
I think some of the most important things are, one, know your audience. What's important to them? One of the mistakes I see is within the cybersecurity industry is using fear as a tactic, using regulations as a tactic. That's projecting things to someone that they may or may not even really care about, or it may not even impact them. And it takes time to get to know people. When you're getting this buy-in from everyone, it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it happens with some people, it happens rather quickly. For some, with other people, it might take you a year of just being tenacious and really getting to know that person, their department, what's important to them. The saying, treat others the way you want to be treated. I find that weird, because the way I want to be treated is probably not the same as you. So I like to treat people the way they want to be treated and get to know them and find out what's important to them. One of the biggest challenges for CISOs, for security professionals, is, like an example, is developers, right? Trying to get developers to code more securely, to be able to implement change after their code's already shipped or something like that. And if you understand the developer's plight, right, they're under tight timelines, they're being pushed to deliver features, pushed to deliver product, and along comes security putting a wrench or slowing things down, they don't want to work with you, right? But if you start getting to know them and letting them know that you respect what they do, that you understand the timelines, the pressures that they're under, and that you want to help them code more securely in the very beginning so that you're not impacting them afterwards, you start building that relationship. And I think it just varies depending on who you're talking to.
And Laura, this is probably true in most roles, right? Because you have to put yourself in their shoes.
Yep.
And it's much easier said than done. A lot of people are, just the way the management style is today, is people are so busy. Like you as a CISO have your own pressures and concerns and day to day, and it's very hard to stop every once in a while and trying to figure out, okay, what does this person want? What are they are facing? And that process is continuous as well. They may, as you described, may be facing certain constraints that you're not aware of. So that part of knowing your audience is super, super important. So talk to me a bit about when you move to a leadership role. Now you are facing the need to interact with other potential board members in the organizations that may have a different idea of what cybersecurity should be, and they're responsible for the business. So they have, again, if you were talking about what they want, how did you figure out, like, what's the easiest way to communicate and deliver? You have to deliver value to show that you're doing the right thing as a CISO, but also that you have to get things done. So you have to get their buy-in as well. So talk to me about all of a sudden you found yourself, I'm assuming, talking to the board about the topics and about describing what it is you do for the company and how you're securing their assets.
I think you need to get to know the company first. What's the company goals? What's the most important thing? Obviously, revenue is always near the very top, because without revenue, there's no company. What are the company goals? And then can you take what you're doing in security and align that with the company goals? How does security help achieve those company goals, protect those company goals? That's a great story to start off with, to be able to help the board, help the other executives understand the why behind security and how it's impacting the company as a whole. No one on the board wants to hear, oh, we had 300 high vulnerabilities and we reduced it to 200 high vulnerabilities. They don't know and they don't care. They just want to know, how's it impacting the business? How is it helping us with revenue? Because a lot of people don't realize this, but security is a sales enabler. So how are you helping increase revenue? And are we getting better or worse?
Yeah, absolutely. And that process itself is not necessarily for the faint of heart. It's just this, again, there's so many moving parts associated with that particular area. And sometimes you had to, I'm pretty sure you had to have difficult conversations both with staff members as well as potentially the management. Was your approach to dealing with potential challenges and things that you had to deal with and maybe deliver bad news or interacting with people in such a way that it's not overly pleasant? Because again, there's a lot of challenges that are associated with somebody having a very senior role, being responsible for the entire security posture of a company.
Uh, if we're talking about, let's say, a breach, right? As an example, it is what it is. And I think that conversation is not as difficult if you have been communicating leading up to that happening and explaining in great detail that, one, it's not if, it's when. Nothing is 100% secure. The CISO should know their environment so well that chances are this breach is not going to be a shocker, right? It's going to be something that has been communicated, that we know it's a risk, that the risk has been accepted or the risk has been mitigated, that you're in the middle of mitigating it. So it shouldn't be a shocker. If it is a shocker, which things happen, if you can reduce your mean time to detection and your mean time to response, the conversation's a lot easier. When you go to the board and you say, look, we identified this breach 2 days ago, we've contained it, now we're looking for indicators of compromise and all that stuff, that's a very different conversation than we had a breach and it was 3 months ago and nobody saw it. That's a very different conversation. I've never had to have that conversation that said we've been breached months ago and we didn't realize. So I don't know that I've had that difficult conversation. I've been involved in remediating breaches in companies I've worked at have had incidents, but I've never had anything where it was a shocker.
Yeah, and it's super interesting because people talk about burnout in this particular profession due to the tremendous stress that you have as a leader. So you're building a program, making sure it operates on a day-to-day basis, and then you have a lot of constraints from how much money we're spending, the staff. Then you have to protect the crown jewels. You have to make sure the business is running, and the implications of potential breach can be tremendous to the company. And then you have to again report to others. A lot of stressful event. And so is that the burnout, is that something real or is that just part of the job? You're C-level executive, that's what it is that you do. Why are people complaining? Why you also get, most CISOs get paid to own that type of risk.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it varies on the burnout. For me, there are times where I think I would just love to go back to being an engineer. Because I do love the engineering side of it all. But
and Laura, it's beware for what you wish for almost, right? Because I think some engineers wish they were.
As long as the salary is you don't have as much impact. You can't affect as much change being an engineer. And I did a podcast a while back saying security is like a way of life. Like, I want to secure the world. If I won the Powerball, I would start up my own not-for-profit and work on securing the world. That would be my goal. It's just a passion of mine, but the burnout is real, and some are cope with it better than others. We all talk, CISOs talk a lot with each other, and we all have our different coping mechanisms, some healthier than others. But at DEF CON, I think it was like 5 years ago, there was a conversation, and one of the sessions was about burnout and the high suicide rate amongst CISOs, the high alcoholism and drug addiction rate amongst CISOs. And it's a thankless job. It very rarely is anyone in security getting kudos and pats on the back. But I think it's a mission. If you look at it that way, it's a mission. It's the right thing to do. And if you find healthy coping mechanisms, like I garden a lot. I like to get out in the garden and listen to true crime podcasts while I garden. It takes my mind off of work. I still am struggling to figure out how to shut my brain off before I go to bed, but I'm working on it.
And again, there's so much to unpack. So first and foremost, how do you start securing the world? You've had continuing education in machine learning and AI. You made the investment in that. And we actually see, so the sky is not falling. There's an investment on the cybersecurity stuff to protect organization and people, individuals. But where do you start? If you had unlimited funds, where would you start? This is an interesting conversation to go on a tangent on.
I would start in two separate ways. One, I would start working toward common communication, common methodologies amongst industry, amongst government, amongst countries. I think we've all been fighting the same battle independently, and we don't really need to. I think there's a lot more information that if we just not come together as a security community, but come together as humanity as a whole. So I would work really hard on that. The other thing I would do is I would probably start working how the Red Cross comes in an emergency, right? I would do something similar for cybersecurity. If you think about, you have schools, you have critical infrastructure, water treatment plants that have employees in small towns of 20,000 that have 20 employees and one IT guy who's doing the IT, the security and everything. Being able to come in the event of a security incident and help them, and then also offer that help before then. I'm a fellow at the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology, and our critical infrastructure is a security nightmare. And we need to get on that, and dumping money or government funds to these different critical infrastructure entities is great, but they don't have the knowledge to implement that or who to reach out to or any of that stuff. So I think having a not-for-profit that comes in and helps, I think would be amazing. Mandate, but free.
Yeah, like a Red Cross type of thing. And speaking of critical infrastructure, and this is great, what's your take on the Baltimore? There's a lot of the shipping boat crashing into the pillar of these massive bridge and taking it down. There's a bunch of rumors, conspiracy theories. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would love
I don't really think it was a cybersecurity incident, in my opinion. But it's funny, when that happened, that was my first thought. But if you work in security, that's always your first thought, right? It was a security incident. And as part of ICIT, we wrote a book called Securing the Nation's Critical Infrastructure. And oddly enough, I wrote the chapter on the dams and waterways. And knowing how vulnerable this country is, like if somebody were to hack our lock systems and boats couldn't get through, the amount of money, the impact to the consumer would be significant. So there's a lot for us to do. No, I don't think that was a cybersecurity incident. I think they had power failure. If you watch the video, there was repeated power failure. I don't think it's a security incident.
It's to at least hear about that, but it's true that the critical infrastructure is one of the weakest links that we have as a nation, and it's everybody's best interest to do that. And as you mentioned, it takes a village, to resolve this. And what's your take on the recent development in an AI? The ability. So first of all, I would say that, as you mentioned, that because it takes a village and we have to communicate more effectively with each other, and we don't necessarily do that maybe because of fear of providing competitive edge, whatever the case may be. But we know that the adversaries have their own forums where they do almost like universally share information. So from your perspective, do you find that the AI is a existential risk to our nation, or is it something that is currently evolving? And how can, on the flip side, harness this technology to use as a protection mechanism?
Yeah. As soon as OpenAI announced ChatGPT, it was like this rocket ship just was ignited under every company that was ever contemplating doing anything with AI and ML. And so, one, I think several security practitioners were caught with their pants down, in essence. I don't think they were prepared. And that's part of our job, is staying on top of emerging technology. Like right now, every CISO in the world should be familiarizing themselves with quantum computing, because a lot of CISOs think, oh, the only problem with quantum computing is it can break cryptography. There's a lot more problems and a lot more benefits. Imagine quantum computing married with AI and how fast that's going to advance. So we should all be getting on top of things. And I think as long as in security, as long as you understand that you are never, ever going to get ahead of the hackers. Full stop. Doesn't happen. Anyone that ever says it doesn't understand security. We're always behind. But if you can reduce that amount of time that we're behind to, this is going to sound silly, but so in car racing,
Yep.
I lost connection for a second.
Yeah. And then when you go ahead.
I was going to say, in racing, there's a term called bump drafting, and it's getting as close behind the leader as you can to knock them off course or to steal their drag, right? We need to do that in security. We need to get as close to the hackers as possible. And so I think that there's that, but there's also the flip side that security can use AI as well. We can leverage that so that many of the administrative tasks, many of the low-level decisions can be made by AI and free us up to actually focus on the harder tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then speaking of risk reduction and bumping, as you mentioned, the boat to get it off course and minimizing the risk associated with the impact associated with the security breach. When, let's say, you come in and you take ownership of a new role, what are the steps you take in the first 90 to 120 days or 6 months to make sure that you are either building a effective program or taking ownership of a program that exists and then trying to improve it? And then the flip question to that is, how do you know you've been successful
Right.
at the end of that period?
I don't know how you ever know if you've been successful. I'm just always going forward and not looking back to see if I've been successful. But I would say, like, in the first 90 days, you need to rationalize everything, right? Your resources, your employees, any contracts that you have, tools that you have. What do we have? How is it working for us? Are we using it to its fullest extent? And then make sure you get that sorted out, because chances are that's going to free up some budget for you.
Yeah. And Laura, do you think that the engineering mindset is something that you employ, that you take, and then more of a quantification type of thing? Like you have a background as building, or as individual programmer, and so on. So do you find that background really helps you figure things out from an overall perspective? And because a lot of this, and I'll raise this question, is because there was some debate whether a CISO should have a technical background or it's okay for them to come from a very different discipline, for example.
I think you can be a CISO without a technical background, but you've got an uphill battle. I find it difficult to comprehend that you can secure something without understanding it. Does that make sense? And like a house, as an example, how are you going to secure it when you don't know how many windows there are? How are you going to secure it when you don't know how many doors? These are things that you need to know. And part of my job as a CISO is to mentor and coach my team as well. And if I'm not getting the respect from my team, I can't tell you how many times I've heard colleagues say, or like at DEF CON or Black Hat, someone say, yeah, I've been trying to say that, but the CISO just doesn't get it. And I've explained it to them a million times and they don't understand. I want to know more than my team. I can't know everything, obviously, but I want to be able to teach them, to mentor them, that level of respect that I know what I'm talking about and we can actually sit down and have a technical conversation, I think has served me well as a CISO, specifically with my teams. There are times when it doesn't serve me well, when I'm in a meeting with the chief privacy officer or the head of HR, and all of a sudden my brain skips into technical mode and I get deer in the headlights and have to remember, oh wait, I got to know my audience.
And so you mentioned that part of your modus operandi is to figure out what it is the organization currently have, what is the status quo, and then I'm assuming the next step would be to figure out maybe the crown jewels and the business processes.
What are say that 3 times fast. What are the crown jewels? What's missing as far as securing the environment? You have to make sure you know what you have to secure it. Asset inventory is huge. And by asset, I don't mean just laptops and servers. There's also information assets, people assets. You need to know what you have. And then once you get that big picture, then you can start formulating a plan on a risk-based approach, right? What's our highest risk, right? Have we done a risk assessment ever? at this company? If we have, let me look at it. If we haven't, let's do one. Let's prioritize. Let's come up with a game plan. You don't want to go back to your stakeholders with 400 things that need to be done, right? You need to pick your top 10 that we're going to work on in the next 6 to 12 months.
And Laura, I think that's part of the magic, to be able to prioritize, because you have almost endless risk, limited budget, limited time frame, and so on. So that prioritization, I think that's almost the key for success, to be able to prioritize what it is the top
Where are
thing.
we going to get our biggest bang for our buck, right? And by buck, I don't mean just paying for a tool, man hours. Where are we going to see the greatest impact? Because that's going to give you two things, right? One, it's going to help secure the company, but the other thing is that when your constituents, your stakeholders see that impact, and that it wasn't arduous, that it was really beneficial, not just to the business, but maybe to their department, then that's also going to build that rapport and that relationship so that they understand, especially as a new CISO coming in, your way of working, and that you're not like any other CISO that they've seen before that comes in and says, all right, time for me to build a fiefdom, or comes in and says, get rid of all these tools, I want to use these. All of us are different. All of us secure things in different ways. There's always your standard guidelines, your NIST cybersecurity framework, or ISO 27001, but we all come at it in a different way.
Do you utilize frameworks? It seems like there's a lot of talk about using frameworks, specific frameworks, to create benchmarks to where your organization is, to create some sort of roadmap and compliance and so on. Do you have any preference on that? And how do you utilize these, if you do at all?
My preference is to create a single gap analysis that shows where you stand across each framework and each regulation, whether it's applicable to you or not, because it may not be applicable to you today, but it might be in a year from now, right? And by and large, the frameworks and the regulations, they all pretty much say the same thing, right? And if you're doing security right, you will have very few gaps in the framework. You will meet all your regulations. So some companies insist, right? You need to pick a framework. And that's fine. But I will still map that framework to everything else that I can find. You may be like, okay, we're doing this cybersecurity framework, everything's great, let's just do that. And then a year from now, the company says we need to go FedRAMP. Where are we at? How close are we to doing that? I will have that answer because I've already mapped it, even though it may have not even been important at the time, but it is now. And that saves me a lot of time. I don't need to bring in consulting firms. I don't need to do any of that. And I want to cover as many bases as I can.
And how do you see the whole role as a CISO evolving in the next foreseeable future? Because again, it hasn't stayed stagnant at all. The kind of roles and responsibilities have changed. We've seen some of the liability also change due to some impact. Yep. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's funny. I think the CISO role has been around for a little over 20 years, like officially around. And it's still in its infancy, which is crazy. People still don't know where CISOs should report to. Should CISOs own IT as well? Should the CIO report to the CISO? Should the CISO report to the CIO? It's all over the place. And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but if you go on LinkedIn, you can probably find it. There's the CISO mind map. And our world, all the things that we're responsible for, if I look at that mind map, I get anxiety. It is insane. However, as far as what's changing, I think the SEC breach notification, what the SEC has been doing lately, I think they're going about it in the wrong way. Publicly posting your breach is in a short time frame is a really great way to tell other bad guys where your vulnerabilities are. On the flip side, I hope something good comes out of it. I hope it establishes some norm for the CISO community. I think that's part of the burnout and the stress that we have is we're like a ship with no port. I don't know how to explain it. I have seen a lot more roles. Like I said earlier, I was laid off last week and just looking to see what's available out there. There's a lot of roles out there where it's a combo role, CISO CTO or CISO CIO, or along the chief product security officer and chief information security officer. Not only are we responsible for a ton of stuff, but let's add some more things. So I don't know. I think it's going to change quite a bit, whether for the better or for the worse. I'm not really sure, if I'm going to be frank.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I looked up, it was Rafiq Rahman.
Yes, there you go.
And
Yeah.
I can tell you, I think not just CISO have anxiety looking at it. I think anybody who's looking at it has anxiety.
It's unnerving. And you, as a CISO, you look at that and you're like, yep, I do that. Yep, I do that. Yep, I do that. I don't need to know all the things I do. It gets stressful just thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we have to know so much. Any executive roles today, and I think any roles in particular, I think these simple jobs, menial tasks are gone.
Yeah.
I think now, because again, it's going to get replaced by machine learning and AI. So we need to, as individuals, to get our skill set and as wide as possible, and be able to have a jack of all trades and master of all trades.
Yeah, I was going to say a master of everything.
Yeah. And so talk to me about your journey so far. And so first and foremost, as you mentioned, you had a chance to pivot in your career as well. So it's not the first time that you are facing these challenges of looking for a new role. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of folks right now in the same boat in the tech industry. And you are, because of your background, you're in a well-positioned place to get your next role. And there's a lot of people that are struggling because they see a lot of roles out there, yet companies are slow to hire. Just talk to me about the whole process. And first and foremost, just what was the kind of impact personally on you and how you're looking to utilize this to grow and to turn this into a growth opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I was laid off for Malwarebytes, I was devastated. I'd never been laid off before. I'd never been fired before. I'd never had even a bad performance review. I'm a classic overachiever, and to get laid off, I thought, what did I do? Why was I included? I just kept going over that time and time again in my head and lamenting over it. This time is a little bit different. One, because I've been through it before. But I think I said to myself this time, what does it matter? What does it matter why I was included in the layoff? Whether it was we just got to cut salaries, or we don't think security is important, or we just we don't enjoy working with Laura. Whatever the reason, what does it matter? It's irrelevant. Time to move forward. I've learned a lot as far as the type of companies I prefer to work for. Whether it be big companies like Comcast or Allstate, companies, or if it's small companies like Hummingbird or mid-sized companies like DLO. I know where my wheelhouse is now. I don't think I ever really did before. I know what my preference is, where I feel really good and impactful. And the most important thing is at the end of the day, right, when you have a job, is you want to have a sense of accomplishment. And what size organization do I feel I really get that sense of accomplishment? Um, it's not an easy time. There's a lot of CISO positions, but they're wanting unicorns who live 5 miles from the office practically. There's a lot of competition out there right now. A lot of tech CISOs and CISOs of cybersecurity vendors have been laid off. And so there's a large candidate pool out there right now. So you just, finding a job is your new job. You pound the pavement, you make connections. So much better this time too than because of ChatGPT and all the different AI tools out there that are available to you to help you tweak your resume, to help you with, there's even ones where you can have it run and record an interview that you're doing, like a job interview, and it will give you critiques afterwards on things that you could have done better or not said or should have said. So it's a different time. I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic. Yeah, well, let's see. I'm only 5 days in now, so we'll see.
And then doing sessions like this as well,
Oh, 100%. Keeping your name out there, keep staying relevant is really important.
Yeah, and first, let me just say this: I appreciate you coming on the podcast as well. It's been very insightful, and it sounds like you are utilizing this particular time to, as part of your personal discovery journey, getting yourself better. And I think you all come out stronger on the other side. One thing I mentioned is that just like you utilize AI and ChatGPT or whatever the case may be, that I think the flip side of that the recruitment industry is also utilizing it, and you get to the point where almost every resume looks the same, so they're utilizing this AI system to filter through it, and
it's like a game of chess between recruiting firms and candidates, with their keyword search, how they optimize. Then you use, AI tools to optimize your resume for the keywords. You find a position that you're interested in, you upload the position to ChatGPT. Please make recommendations to optimize my resume for this specific position. It's crazy, and I think, that battle is going to continue, or that game is going to continue. But I think where you separate yourself is through those relationships and being creative and staying relevant and doing industry podcasts, making sure you have I don't think I really realized how great my network is until I made my announcement that I was laid off. That one post so far has had over 85,000 impressions on LinkedIn and like 700, what do you call it? Like likes or whatever. So many reposts. I was just so amazed at my community. I just felt the love.
Yeah, and it's very uplifting. And I love the cybersecurity community because in general, I would say everybody's so welcoming to like newcomers. Everybody's giving back. There's a lot of love to go around, I think, in this industry. And then it's amazing that we have to wait for something to happen to realize that, and we should be thankful every day that we're part of this.
I think when you're in security, you're just heads down, trying to if you're gainfully employed, you're heads down trying to make things happen, and you mentor and you coach friends, colleagues, all that stuff. But you really rarely get time to step back and reflect on your community of colleagues, the people that when you go to something like RSA and you see someone, you're like, gosh, how long have we been friends? Oh, 20-something years. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. But I think never is there a time when you need it more than knowing you have a huge community is right after a layoff or after something like a breach. I've been at conferences where the CISO, one of the CISOs, is in the middle of a breach during a conference, and you should watch all the CISOs rally around that person and offer assistance and offer help, because it's a mission. Security is a mission. For anyone who's been in this industry longer than 5 years knows it's a mission and it's a passion.
So I have two more questions, and then we're going to wrap up because I know you got to go. But one is, let's talk about your second passion, the gardening piece. Do you feel that maybe because it's very tangible, and because you typically deal with intangibles in cybersecurity, you can't touch it, you can't feel it, and maybe because with gardening, there's a direct impact. You can almost see it and touch it, and it's very tangible.
I think there's part of that. I think the other thing, science has shown that getting your hands in dirt, the microbiomes, all that stuff, it gives you something back, like physically. It's healthy to be out in the garden. You've also got vitamin D from the sun. You've got all your senses are kicking in, right? When you're working in cybersecurity, basically the senses that you're really using are sight and touch, right? Keyboard, eyes, right? You're not tasting cybersecurity. You're not smelling cybersecurity. You're not really even hearing it. And when you're in the garden, all your senses are impacted in such a positive way. And then to be able to nurture something or to create is wonderful. And my neighbor thinks it's so funny because when I'm out gardening, I always have earbuds in and I'm listening to murder podcasts. And she's like, this is so weird. I was like, I don't know. It's just my thing. I like to listen to true crime podcasts and get my hands in the dirt.
And it's almost a form of escape, and a very beneficial one as well.
Yep. Yeah.
So do you can officially say that you have a green thumb, that you're very successful in the gardening?
I'm very successful at formal gardening, boxwoods, crooked hedges, flowers, vegetables. No, I could be successful, but I am not battling bugs. Like I like bugs, but I'm not going to sit there and go out one morning and realize that the slugs have eaten all my cabbage, or the bunnies have eaten all my carrots. I just not doing it.
Laura, that was great. So let me ask you one final question. Who is your ideal company to work for? You mentioned specifically that now you have a greater vision in terms of the fit, in terms of what it is that you're specifically looking for.
For me, a mid-sized company I've decided is my wheelhouse. I think it's harder to affect change in a really large company. And that's something I need to feel successful, is to be able to affect change. A smaller company, I don't think I'm I don't want to say as good, but I think I'm distracted a little bit on a small company, worrying about the stability of the company itself. My wheelhouse is probably 2,000 to 6,000 employees. I'm completely comfortable in whether it's US only or it's global. That doesn't bother me at all. I love learning new cultures, and travel doesn't bother me. But I have noticed the last two companies, I think I've been a little bit distracted worrying about the stability of the company. And that's not fair on the cybersecurity side of things to have that distraction, to me.
Right. Makes total sense. And what's the easiest way, Laura, to reach out to you and know more? I've seen some CISOs that are currently consulting until they get like the full-time position or whatever the case may be, to learn more about you and potentially also hopefully offer you a position.
Oh, that would be lovely. I'm available on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. My email address is winyard@gmail.com. Reach out to me. I'm always connected, as almost all cybersecurity people are.
That's true. We never disconnect. Even I'm assuming when you're nurturing your flowers, you still have the alerts on your phone
Yeah.
on,
Yeah, I
despite
do.
the fact that you're busy on multiple senses. Laura, it's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast today. Very much appreciated. Thanks for sharing the journey and your insights into the profession. And I'm certain 100% that you're going to land a phenomenal position in the near term. And until then, thank you all for those who joined, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Stay safe online as well as offline. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, David.